Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about safely backfeeding generator power back to your house to cover your electrical needs during a power outage. Now, during Hurricane Helene, we lost power for 7 days. I was what I would call minimally prepared. I did have a generator, I did have a little bit of fuel, but that was about it. That made it definitely more time consuming, more stressful, and an already stressful situation to be able to get the generator set up. And then I had to run extension cords into the house to plug in the refrigerators to keep our food good. You know, we have 2 refrigerators and they both couldn't run off of the GFI receptacles. It kept tripping. So I realized then that I needed to do something different, and I started researching how do you get power into your house without having to use the extension cords, and I learned a ton of stuff. Now, I'm not a professional electrician, but I am willing to go and ask questions, read things, cross-check them, cross-reference them, and make sure I'm doing it properly and safely, and that's exactly what I did. So I identified what I needed to be able to hook our 9,000 watt generator up into our household electrical grid and get it to safely power receptacles, lights, fans, and obviously all of our refrigerators and freezers that we have. I don't want to go too in depth into that information on the front side of the video. I just want to give a little bit of context of why we're doing this. I have a couple of other videos out that kind of talked about a similar topic when we had to set up a power plug-in for our well for this very same thing. And I said then that I was going to do a backfeeding video, so here we are. My goal in sharing this is just to kind of show you, hey, this can be done. Do it now before you need it. Take the information I'm giving you and extrapolate how you're going to apply it to your generator size, what your needs are, like how your electrical box is set up. There's like a lot of factors. So this isn't going to be just a cookie cutter here, do exactly what I'm doing. It's just showing you that, hey, you can do this and you can figure it out, and here's some direction, and then you take that and you make it happen on your property. All right, guys, to get started, you're gonna have to identify a few things about your generator. So like I said, I'm gonna go over ours, but this is not necessarily going to apply to yours. You're just gonna have to find the right information for the generator you have. All right, so ours is a 9,000 watt generator. It's got a 30 amp max plug. Had to identify that is important, 30 amp, and then the type of plug-in that this goes into, because they can change based off of essentially how much amperage and electricity is being transferred through it. Once I identified that information, I could purchase the required materials to set this up. One thing, number one, is a cord. You had to identify the kind of plug, which that also helped identify the kind of box you needed to get to be able to plug that extension cord in. So that cord's going to run from the generator to this. This is going to run to the electrical grid of our house. The 30 amp max is the other important factor, and the reason why that's important is because that's the maximum amount of amperage that can be put out by that plug. So you need to match that to a breaker that's going to go into your electrical box. Mine is square D. I mean, honestly, that also is going to be variable. It doesn't matter. You just need to make sure that it matches the box on your house that you're going to be trying to put it in. Mine's a square D. I make sure that it fit the square D box that I'm going to be putting it in. One thing I did want to go over is the fact that this is a double pole, which means that the poles are attached, so they flip at the same time. They cannot be flipped individually. And the reason why it matters that this is a double pole is because you're going to be running 240 volts back to your system. Now, each one of your GFI receptacles in the front of your generator is 120, and what this does is it combines them and sends 240. So that 240 volt 30 amp breaker backfeeding the house gave us access to more power than we had whenever we were running off of the GFI receptacles on the front. One GFI receptacle could not run both refrigerators inside of our house. We had to figure something else out. It kept flipping the GFI trip on the front of the receptacle. But when I had it backfed off of the 240 volt 30 amp, it ran all the freezers, both refrigerators, lights, fans, and some other stuff with no problem. The generator did not act like it was under any kind of distress whatsoever. I probably had more power available than what I was actually consuming. Then you've got to find a way to actually house and connect everything. So the plug-in box comes with a way to connect on the side. Actually, let me go ahead and pick that up again. See that little hole right there? That's where we're going to connect up. I've got some fittings, some PVC glue to glue it all together, And then I've got this flex tube that we're going to essentially connect this plug-in into this box. Now, before we get into setting all that up, I wanted to go over a couple of things that are particular to our place. It may help you guys on your project so that way you don't get stumped by it. So this is our main 200 amp service feed, and then it feeds from here, which is our meter and our main breaker, into another panel inside the laundry room, which then disperses all the power to the different breakers. All right, so the reason I'm bringing this up and showing you is that with these two 100 amp breakers that are feeding sub panels, there's no space in here to hook up the 30 amp double pole for the generator. Over here, I've got stuff that I have to run, and I've only got one spot left, so that's actually not enough space to run it here either. I've got this sub panel that's running the pantry. That sub panel has a bunch of extra space in it. I also know that because that is a 100 amp breaker running 100 amps out to the sub panel, that the wire between the sub panel and the main panel is going to be plenty thick enough to carry the 30 amp load from the generator. So because I have space out here and I don't up there, I figured out that I can actually hook the generator plug up here, and then it will actually feed the electricity back up through past that 100 amp breaker and into the main system. The fact that I can actually set my plug up here and then I've got 50 foot on that cord, I can actually set the generator up further away from the house, which ended up being a big benefit because we had the windows open to keep air moving and to keep the house cooler, especially at night. And whenever you're running the generator, it can be kind of loud if it's up close to the house. And this gave us some distance that kind of kept it, I wouldn't say quiet, but it was quieter. We're going to jump into assembly. I'm going to go through and glue in all the different pieces of the PVC and connections, and then we'll hook it up, wire in the 30 amp breaker, and then once that's in, we'll go through and talk about the steps you need to take to be able to turn this on and get it functional in the case of a power outage. And the primary focus is also going to be safety. Safety for you, safety for your house, and then also safety for the linemen and the workers of your power company who are out there working to restore power. You want to make sure that you're not going to cause any kind of dangerous situation for them. I've got the plug installed, but I haven't wired it in. I went ahead and turned off the 100 amp breaker that's running the sub panel, so there's no power coming to this. I did check it. So now I'm going to wire in this 30 amp breaker. The piece of wire that I ran through from the plug to this sub panel to go into the breaker is a 10 gauge 4 wire, so it's got a bare copper, a white, a black, and a red. All right, on the back of that plug, it's color coordinated. It has a red circle around where the red goes, white, black, ground. So then how this is going to hook up into the sub panel is your white and your ground actually on this particular sub panel run to the same bar. Sometimes that actually is separated where the green and the white run to 2 separate bars. Again, I don't know exactly when you're supposed to do that and when you're not. This one's run together. I know on like my 200 amp service behind the well house, that they're run separately. So I don't really have the answer to that, but this is what this particular panel has, and it's wired. This was actually wired in by professional electricians who are friends of ours, so I know that it's done right. So anyways, your white and your ground is going to go to the white neutral bar, and then the red and the black are going to go to each side, because on the back of your 30 amp breaker there's going to be 2 screws. You're going to run your red and your black to each of those. So red goes to one, black goes to the other. Then you're going to install that onto your sub panel. We'll pick it back up after we get that part done. Okay, it's fully wired in. Now let's go through the steps you're going to take to actually set this up and turn it on when you lose power. So I got a 50-foot cord because I wanted to be able to get the generator as far away from the house as possible. What I'll probably do is plug it in and run the cord back behind this building and set the generator up on the other side, so as far away from the house as I can. All right, those cords plug in and they turn, and once they turn, it's like a I don't know, quarter of an inch, they lock in. Does the same thing on the front of the generator. So you're going to set your generator up, run your cord, plug it in, lock both of those in. Okay, and then you're going to stop. You're going to come over to your main box, and I'm going to turn my 200 amp main breaker, which comes in from my meter, off. This is a huge thing that you need to do. Probably the most important thing if you're going to backfeed your house is turn your 200 amp system off, so that way no power escapes out into the grid past your 200 amp breaker. All right, now this is a 100 amp sub panel, and this is a 100 amp sub panel. This is the one that's actually feeding the electricity, so those are actually both going to stay on because they're just going to be pass-throughs. I have another panel inside that this 200 amp breaker feeds to. I would have to go inside, flip some breakers in there also, but I can cover the same information from right here. These three small breakers are fine. They're small enough amperage that they are not going to cause any problems. But this 50 amp for the camper and the 60 amp which runs a small water heater right here for our master bedroom, I've got to flip those off, okay? Because those are 50 and 60. That's too much amperage and that's too much power draw for our 30 amp breaker that's going to be running on this generator. Now I'm going to go inside if I was going to turn this on, and I'm going to find any double pole breaker that is on. So for us, our furnace, condenser unit for the ACs, the cooktop, and the oven are on double pole breakers, and I think the dryer. All of those have got to be flipped off because you're not going to be producing enough power with this 30 amp breaker on this 9,000 watt generator to be able to run those. Once we have all of those turned off, we're ready to start feeding power to the house. We'll start the generator up, get it running. Okay, once the generator's up, sometimes generators have a switch on the generator itself that turns on the 30 amp breaker. Ours does not, so I wouldn't have to do it, but if you do, you'll need to flip that switch. All right, then you'll come over to this sub panel that we just hooked up our plug to, and you'll open that box and you'll flip that 30 amp breaker. Now that's going to send electricity and it's going to feed your house, okay? And at that point, you've got the power you need. By setting this up and running it off of the 240 volt 30 amp plug, we were able to run all of our freezers, both refrigerators, lights, ceiling fans, charging. Almost all the receptacles worked and had no issues. So like we were able to charge stuff, we were able to turn stuff on. We could run small appliances like our kettle for coffee, our grinder, things like that. Now there were bigger appliances like the microwave and things like that you couldn't run. One of the big things that did is, one, not having to worry about the GFI breakers flipping on the front of the generator and your freezer's not actually running. And two, being able to just have lights in your room, running the ceiling fans to keep the air moving. Like that, just off what we were able to provide off of our 9,000 watt generator, that was a huge thing. Now, we are now currently set up that if we do lose power, I should be able to get this set up within 10 minutes and get everything running and be set up for however long it's going to take to get power back on. I got our generator from Harbor Freight. It was very affordable compared to other generators, and it's worked for 4 years now without having any problems. We hadn't started that generator for probably 18 months when we lost power. I pulled it out, put what fresh gas I had in it, and it started right up and ran with no problems. That's really all there is to it. Now, before I sign this video off, I did want to kind of go over one more thing. Kind of already talked about like generator size. That's really just going to be personal preference. Like how much do you want to spend and how much do you want it to cover? But one thing that I did look into is I had a Generac dealer come out and give us a quote for a whole house generator. It was for a 24,000 watt propane run whole house generator. It could run basically almost everything. What I wanted to bring up was that it was extremely expensive. I mean, like, it was, I think the bid was like $16,000 to install this generator, and the transfer switch, you know, all the stuff, the wires and things like that. I was like, well, I see the benefits of having a whole house generator on a transfer switch. What happens in that situation is power goes off. There's a certain programmed amount of time. So whenever the timer reaches 0, you know, set it for 1 minute, I think is what we had talked about, it will automatically turn on. It runs off of propane, which makes it super quiet. I've actually heard one of these run. It's very, very quiet. All right, and then it hits a bypass switch, which then bypasses the main feed, so it doesn't backfeed any power into the system, and it turns all the power on in your house, and it does it automatically. Now, from my understanding and my research, the conversion rate of propane fuel to electricity is way better than gasoline. You can also keep a lot more of it on hand, and you can put 500, 750 gallon propane tanks out, and those will run this generator for a very long time. So I saw the benefits of it, and I was like, well, I'm not sure. I started doing was just really looking into this, because if there's any situation that I can figure something out myself and save some money, a lot of times I'll do it. Now, sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes that's just, you can't do that. If I had to do some kind of major repair on my truck, I'm not going to do that myself. Like, I'm not a mechanic. I don't have the time to go and learn how to be that skilled of a mechanic. So I would just, you know, hire someone to do that work. I would outsource it. But this one, I was like, man, I don't know. I think I want to look into this more. So I didn't take them up on the bid, and I started looking into it, and I found out that you can actually get the exact same generator from Generac, the pad that it goes on, and the bypass switch at Lowe's. Even in that bid of $15,000 or $16,000, that didn't cover the propane tank. You still have to pay to have the propane company bring out the tank, set it up, fill it up, and run the line to the generator. So, like, that cost was still on you anyways. So at Lowe's, you can get a 24,000 watt Generac generator, the pad that it sits on top of, and the bypass switch. So the only other thing you'd have to buy is the electrical wire that would run from the transfer switch, or from the generator to the transfer switch, and the transfer switch to your main feed, which is really not that much, because it's not going to be that long of a run. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like it's going to be 100 feet. It's going to be 20, 30, 40 feet, depending on your setup. So I was like, okay, the price is what really got me. It was like $6,000. That's so much less. But then I really started to think, I can get a military discount at Lowe's, and I can get 10% off. So that really got my gears turning on, like, okay, maybe I do want to do this and figure it out. It feels like it's a challenge. It's definitely something that's outside of my, I say, expertise, but I don't think that it's that hard. I started really looking into it and, like, reading up about the bypass switch and how you set it up, and it's not super complicated. So there would be some logistical stuff you have to overcome, like when you're setting it up. I know that you have to have your power company come out and pull the meter, which takes power off your house, set up the bypass switch, and then have them come back out and set it back up. So, like, there'd be some, like, coordination I'd have to do. I'd probably have Jessica take the kids and go hang out in Charleston for the weekend or something, or maybe not even the week. I guess it'd have to be during the week for the power company to come out. So anyways, there's stuff like that I'm thinking about. I was doing the math, and for me to figure it out myself, I could save us something like $9,000. I'm heavily considering figuring out how to do a whole house Generac generator on my own and installing it and doing some videos on it to show you guys, hey, if I'm telling you, if I can figure this out, most anyone can figure it out. So if I'm successful, then guys, we could save some serious money setting this up and have some serious backup power if we lose power again. Well, that's going to wrap this one up, guys. I hope that it was interesting, and I hope you guys learned something. if at least, even if you don't go with a whole house generator, I highly suggest that you at least do something like this. All in, it's like a little over $600. That's including the generator, the plug, the cord, and the 30 amp double pole breaker to plug it in and backfeed it to your system. But yeah, get something like this set up just on the off chance that you guys have to lose power and you need something quick to be able to get power back restored to your house until. So thank you, and I will catch you guys on the next one.